So he acts in righteousness in calling kings to his service. I was reading this week the biography by Dr. Peter Lilbeck, the president of Westminster Seminary, where he looked at the life of George Washington. And of course, there's been a lot of debate and discussion about the first president of our country, the founding father, the general of the American Revolution, as to what was his Christian faith. Did he really have faith in Christ, or was he simply a deist, or a man of the Enlightenment? What are we to say of George Washington? Dr. Lilbeck's evaluation of George Washington was that he was a devout Episcopalian Christian who spoke often of the providence of God, God's acts in history and in time. George Washington was not a deist with the idea that God created the heavens and the earth, then set them off on their order like it was a clock and just allowed it to unwind itself over time. The deist has the notion that God is separate from this world and just observes what's going on. That was not the view of George Washington. He saw God as active in history and time. And so he talks about God's providence time and time again. In fact, in one letter he says that someday he will have time, when he's finished being the general and finished being president, to become a preacher of providence. It's a great theme in all of his letters and all of his speeches. One particular battle during the American Revolution in 1776, he with his army was in Brooklyn Heights on Long Island. They were surrounded by the British. And they were in a desperate circumstance, and the British could have destroyed them at any moment. And if they had, it would have been pretty much the end of the American Revolution. It's just one example among many when George Washington felt his life was on the line, and the whole contest lay before him. During the course of that night, the British decided to attack the next morning. So out of desperation, George Washington led his troops across the Delaware over the course of the night. They all manned their boats and went across the Delaware. And in the morning, a fog came over the river. And the American revolutionaries were able to go across that Delaware, and it wasn't until the last boat arrived at the other side that the fog lifted. And it's at that time that the British saw that all the Americans had left. And Washington saw in that one example among many the hand of God at work in the American Revolution. God standing on the side of those engaged in a good and right action. Dr. Lilbeck also notes that the British tried to do the same thing. Tried to cross the river at another time, and all they got was a huge storm with rough seas that didn't allow them to get by. God, in His providence, acts on behalf of His people. He governs nations. He governs His elect. As He says here in the 4th verse, I am the Lord, with the first of them and with the last, I am He. We should note the sovereignty of God's electing grace here in verse 4, who has done this and carried it through, calling forth the generations from the beginning. God is saying that right from the very start, I am the one who called Abraham, and every succeeding generation, I have been active into their history. In the redemptive history of Israel, God has been at work, calling one family after another, one individual after another, into a saving relationship with Himself. He's done that throughout the generations of His people, and He'll do it until the very end, until the last generation. You and I, generations to come, He will be there till the very end, bringing His people to Himself, because He is the Lord. He stands before us as the sovereign King. Verse 5 and following, verses 5 through 7, you have this interesting parody of the nations as they see God's sovereign work in history and time, as they're confronted with the fact that the God who created them rules over all and is methodically, purposefully accomplishing His will in history and in time. And as they see God, as it were, marching through time, accomplishing His will, they stir themselves up. Not that they come to God and bow before Him and acknowledge Him as their God, even though they see these great works, God opening up the waters and allowing Israel to walk through, then the Egyptians trying to do the same and being swallowed up. They see all these things, but they don't turn to the Lord. Why? Because they were unregenerate. Because they are in rebellion against God. They are lost in their sin. And no amount of evidence, no amount of persuasion will change their mind or their purposes. Rather, what they will do is give themselves even more fully to their own idolatries. And so Isaiah paints the picture before us of how they go off and they make their idols. The craftsman makes it, and he talks to the goldsmith about how to fashion it and to cover it. And they're all very energetic about all this. And then with wonderful irony, Isaiah concludes by saying, and they nail the idol down so it won't topple. What a bold, powerful God you have! So fearful that you've got to nail him down to make sure it doesn't topple over. Compare this to the living God, the creator of the heavens and the earth, the God who marches through time and history to do His will. Your gods are nothing. Nothing. And that is true today. As men and nations all across the earth may try to resist the rule of King Jesus and His dominion over all, and manufacture their own gods, whether it be the gods of the imagination. I'm reading one theologian who talks about God evolving and maturing over time and making progress and discovering Himself and these kinds of things. What nonsense! Compare that to the living God, the Creator, the one who ordains all that takes place, for whom there is nothing to be discovered, nothing to be uncovered, no unfounded or unsettled history to be explored. A God who doesn't simply wait to find out what people are going to do before He knows what He's going to do. No, the God of the Scriptures is the one who declares the end from the beginning. He rules over all. He is not subject to an open universe. So, Isaiah, in biting irony, laughs at the nations and their efforts to compose their own gods, which can do nothing for them. By comparison, the Lord